there could not be a better organization or with more important meetings. So great to have you with us.
Thank you, Fred. Great to be here.
Okay, I think we are going to go ahead and get started. Thank you everyone for joining us tonight. For those of you who I don't know, my name is Rachel and I'm the program director at Cancer Support Community Pasadena. And I know that there are some new faces on the Zoom call that aren't familiar with our organization. So we are a nonprofit that provides free support to individuals and families impacted by cancer. And tonight is one example of many different kinds of programs that we offer to the community. So after this workshop, I invite anybody on this call to reach out to us to learn more if you or your loved ones could benefit from our services. So we are just so pleased that you are joining us tonight for this interview with the legendary Fred Clare, the former general manager of the Dodgers. And we are going to give him a proper introduction in just a moment. But first, I have just a couple of administrative items to attend to. First off, for the most part, we are going to keep you muted for the duration of this interview just to reduce background noise, but there will be an opportunity for Q&A at the end of this workshop. So we'll invite you to unmute yourself or you're welcome to type questions into the chat. Also, we're trying to get really accurate attendance for tonight. So if for some reason your name isn't clear to us on your Zoom profile, we may private message you just to get accurate information for attendance. And that is all in terms of admin. Actually, one other item, we are going to be recording tonight. So you will be seeing that recording button on the top left corner of your screen, but please know that faces will not be captured in the recording, only the faces of those that are speaking, so not the faces of those in attendance. So all of the administrative items aside, I would now like to introduce our two moderators for the evening, which are esteemed board members that serve on CSCP's board of directors. First off, we have Ellen Driscoll, who is a family law and personal injury lawyer who has her own firm in Pasadena. And we also have Sean Townley, who is the vice president of the Manufacturers Bank. So Sean, I will hand it over to you to introduce Fred and get us going.
Thank you. And I've been honored to be a director for a couple of years now and a supporter of about 7 years for Cancer Support Community Pasadena. It's been very, very fulfilling. Wonderful people, wonderful organization. Fred Clare is our very special guest whom I just met. Great to meet you, Fred. He's a former Major League Baseball executive who served in really a number of roles for the our beloved Los Angeles Dodgers from 1969 to 1998, and most especially as the GM from 1987 to 1998. He was a former sports writer with basically no experience in player trades and roster construction, who rocked the baseball world by propelling the Dodgers in 1988 to the victory at the World Series. In 2016, Fred was diagnosed with cancer, and the book, which we enjoyed reading enormously, Extra Inning, recounts his remarkable career and an almost miraculous recovery from cancer at the City of Hope. We're privileged to speak with Fred and learn about the wisdom that he's gained through his life and his very varied career and the challenges in that. So my associate Ellen and I would like to ask Fred a few questions, if I may. Fred, you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, great. How would you describe for everyone the book Extra Innings for those who would like to read it, which I do highly recommend?
I would say that Extra Innings tells the story of the battle against cancer. And also the author, Tim Madigan, weaves into all of that stories from the baseball world where I have spent much of my life. And in some ways, I like to think of it as a story of two world championship teams, City of Hope and the Los Angeles Dodgers.
Awesome, awesome. What do you hope that readers will take away from the book, would you say?
My hope is that the readers will take away the story, some of the history, but more important, what's happening at City of Hope today. And the other thing that I hope that the readers will take away is the importance of a support group. And I think that we, in some ways, have come close to the mark, because when one sees the reviews on Amazon, the reviews are rewarding to me, because most point to two things: what a great hospital City of Hope must be, and what a great support team Fred had. So that that was my hope, and hopefully it is accomplished in the book.
I would say so. May I ask, was it a difficult process to work with Tim Madigan?
Not difficult at all. When I became a patient at City Hope in 2016 and started with my treatments, I was interested in learning as much as I could about the City of Hope. And I went to the Biller Center, where the wonderful Jeannie Lawrence has been there for nearly 40 years. Asked Jeannie, a dear friend now, about books on City of Hope. And there are many fine books, historical books, but I didn't see the book that really talked about what I saw as the leaders of City of Hope today and the process of City of Hope. So that was the beginning of the thought process. I had the opportunity to meet with Robert Stone, the president, and told him that I thought City of Hope could benefit with a book. And he said, Fred, that you mentioned that, and a new marketing director we just hired has been telling me the same thing. So City of Hope worked out an agreement with Mascot Books. Mascot had someone first in mind to do the book, and that person, by chance, took on another assignment. And so Naren Ariel, the publisher of Mascot Books, said, we have someone else, Fred, that I want to introduce you to, that I think can do the job. And that was Tim Madigan. And it could not, as fate played its hands, it could not have been better, because Tim is a dedicated writer, was so interested in City of Hope and meeting with the doctors there and all the people. So it was a great assignment for us to have Tim as the author.
Mm-hmm. It's a great partnership. I'm so glad. Kind of back to baseball. When you had taken over as the GM, from what I read, you really had a little experience in player personnel. Did you set any goals for yourself, or what were your goals?
Well, first of all, when I never thought of myself as having little experience. I had been with the Dodgers for nearly 20 years. Mm. The Dodger organization was very small. So I knew all the people in baseball operations. I had been to many of Al Campanis's general manager meetings and other meetings. So I knew literally in 20 years, not only the major league staff and the manager at that time, Walter Alston, I knew all the coaches. I knew all the people in the minor league department. I knew each and every scout. So I had no concerns. I knew I was surrounded by a great team. And I had a goal that was the goal of the Dodgers every year during the O'Malley years. Field a team that has the capability to win a world championship. So the goal was easy to set.
Well, you achieved that goal. That's for sure. And then kind of carrying it over, were there lessons that you learned as a baseball executive that maybe that you used with your experience in your successful treatment of cancer?
I think so. I think the biggest thing that I learned in Dodger days was the importance of teamwork and the importance of relying on the people around you. And I also knew as I advanced in the Dodger organization the importance of taking responsibility for each and everything that we do. So I was surrounded again by a great group of people and had total confidence and was happy to take over the role when Peter O'Malley asked me to become the general manager. And so I had no fear. I knew that I was surrounded by good people and that I would work as hard as it was humanly possible.
Awesome. Well, I know Ellen may have a couple questions. Maybe if I could hand it over to her. Ellen, did you want to ask Fred a few things?
I do. Thank you so much. And Fred, thank you for being here and being so generous with your time. We really appreciate it. Going back, tell us something about your upbringing and what your parents were like.
I grew up in a very small town in Ohio, Jamestown, Ohio, population about 1,500. I don't think it's changed in the 50 years since I've left Jamestown, or more than 50 years actually. My father, as I may have mentioned, owned the corner drugstore. I had a love for sports, and particularly basketball, because when you grow up in Ohio, it's basketball is the sport. And we had, in a population of 1,500, I think our gym seated probably 500 or more. Mm-hmm. So my goal was to be the point guard on the basketball team. That's what drove me. So I had the love for sports and was very blessed with wonderful parents. My dad and mom, and my dad took the family to the first major league game in Cincinnati. And when I saw Crosley Field, I knew this is where I wanted to be.
Then moving way forward, jumping ahead if you could, tell us what your cancer treatment was, what it was like, both physically and emotionally.
Well, cancer came as a shock, to say the least, as far as the diagnosis. In 2015, I had a little spot on my lip from many days in the sun. I always protected myself with sunscreen with a hat. I never used the lip gloss for protection. And so I had the Mohs procedure, as many of us on this call probably have had. In 2015, it seemed a very noted Mohs procedure doctor. It seemed to go very well. It was minor in nature. It literally was just 2 swipes. Mm-hmm. They told me it was innocent looking and everything looked great. That was 2015. A year and a half later, that cancer had moved from my lip and was headed north in my jawbone. And I was in considerable pain that led to any number of MRIs and x-rays before it was determined that it was squamous cell carcinoma. And I went to City of Hope with the recommendation that City of Hope was the place that I should be, and met with this young doctor, Dr. Gernon, who on the first meeting introduced himself. I said, Dr. Gernon? He said, no, call me TJ. So TJ became my doctor, Thomas Gernon. And he said and told us, Cheryl and I, this is a nasty cancer and we have to do something now. And so they gave me 2 choices. They could take the fibula bone from my left leg and replace my jawbone. And I remember saying to Dr. Gernon that, Dr. Gernon, you know, a strange thing to say, but we say strange things with cancer. I said, I'm 80 years old. I said, I'm really more interested in quality of life than length of life. And so what are the other options? And he said, we can operate, remove the cancer from your jawbone, and and go from there, which we did. So I had the surgery in August of 2016, underwent 33 radiations to my head and neck, 7 chemotherapies. The last chemo was to be in late December. I said, great, I'll be ready for Christmas. We were out of gas when we got to the end of December, but then started feeling great in January of 2017. And then in a visit to see Dr. Verna in February, the cancer had come back into my neck. So the only option at that point was immunotherapy, relatively new. And but I was fortunate to qualify for the immunotherapy. And the immunotherapy, the science of medicine, is what has me here today. And as it turned out, in 2019, after all of the radiations and all the other things that had happened, that I'd gone through, I had to go undergo another surgery. They had to now, my jawbone was destroyed, disintegrated. So they now had to do the surgery that I really didn't want to do, but was happy to have the chance that they could do. So they removed the fibula bone from my left leg and replaced my jawbone in July 31 of 2019. So, but the good news is, and I'll have a scan tomorrow, Dr. Berman tells me that my fibula bone looks good in my jaw, and I've told him it's not the first time I put my foot in my mouth, so I'm happy to hear that.
So it's funny. Tell us about the emotional ups and downs, uncertainty. How was that through this whole long ordeal?
I think that I faced all of it in a rather matter-of-fact way. I knew that I'll repeat it again, that I knew I was with a great team. And I knew that what I could do was to do the best that I could in following what the doctors were telling me. So I never lost confidence in the City of Hope. And I knew from my competitive nature that I was going to battle with every breath of air that I had. And I have.
And how was that similar to leading a championship winning baseball team?
Mm-hmm. You know, there are similarities. There are a number of similarities. A baseball season, I often described it as a marathon. It's 162 games. You will have very good days and you will have very bad days. You will have good streaks and you will have bad streaks. The one thing as the general manager of a team that you cannot do, and I think this is what really helped me, you cannot get caught up. This is stuff, it's hard to do. You can't get caught up emotionally. You have to stay on course. And so the other part about City of Hope that's quite remarkable compared to baseball. When I walk into City of Hope, I feel like at times that I'm walking into the Dodger clubhouse because I'm part of a team and they give us a wristband. So we know who we are as patients. And we are together. We are together in a battle, fellow patients. We are one of the strongest parts of the battle against cancer. And so I've always felt a part of that team and related very much to the journey that I had in baseball and being part of a team.
So the fellow patients, if you will, are part of your team, as well as the doctors and all the medical professionals. Is there anybody significant, it's a big group I know, that was maybe most helpful or most influential to you during this whole event?
We don't have the time for me to name the significant people unless you have about 2 hours, but one of them actually is on this call tonight, and I saw his name, and it's Eric Tracy, who had undergone head and neck surgery. And I think many of you with the support system at Pasadena know Eric, and Eric, again, is going through cancer treatment, as you may know, at City of Hope. But there were so many people, first and foremost, as far as support, the person who was with me every step of the way. I never entered City of Hope before the pandemic. Never, ever, not one time without Cheryl at my side. Every step of the way, into every radiation, into every chemotherapy, into every immunotherapy, into every occupational therapy, into every physical therapy, into meeting with the dietitian. So I know the importance of a support group. And support can come from so many ways. I mentioned Eric, who is on this call or is on this call. And it can be from someone maybe very noteworthy. Kurt Gibson, when he knew they were going to stick me in this chamber to radiate my face 33 times, said, Fred, you have to be tougher than that machine. And I have a neighbor, Charlie, and I stopped one day after visit City Hope. He was outside working in his lawn. He said, Fred, I have a friend that underwent the same cancers I read about yours that you did. And he had a doctor who gave him advice. The doctor had a background in psychology that made the difference. And it was 3 things. And I said, Charlie, tell me, what are the 3 things? He said, you have to take, true story, you have to take 1 more step today than you did yesterday. I said, okay, Charlie, I understand that. And he said, and you have to have a goal. And I said, I know about goals, and I have a goal. I'm going to get back on the golf course. And Fred, you have to have a dog.
Dog.
And he stopped me. I said, Charlie, I understand 1 step. I understand a goal. Why do I need a dog? And he said, Fred, and it's very important. He said, if you have a dog, you have to take responsibility. A patient has to take responsibility. And that stayed with me, and I think it's true.
So there's one part in the book that I probably loved the most. And if you could share this for those that haven't had a chance to read the book yet, which is inexcusable in my world because I think it's excellent. Tell us the story about you and Cheryl throwing the baseball.
Well, when the
love that story.
When the Dodgers, well, Bill Platsky of the Times wrote a column, something about it was kind of there's a big story in the LA Times and a picture, and Fred Clare almost forgotten. And I read the story and I thought, you know, it's a nice column by Bill, but I never thought of myself as forgotten. My family knew me, my friends knew me. I didn't know I'd been forgotten. I didn't know I had been there to be forgotten. But anyway, Platsky kind of panned the Dodgers and said, it's the guy that was there 30 years, world championship general manager. You've never honored him. And the Dodger marketing guy called me and said, Fred, they got us. It's just been a complete oversight. So he said, we'd like to have you throw out the first ball. This was in 2018. And so I said, fine. I didn't make many trips back to Dodger Stadium unless it was for a kind of a business reason. So I told Cheryl about the invitation. She said, Cheryl being Cheryl said, well, when's the last time you threw a ball? I said, Cheryl, I've thrown a ball all my life. I was raised throwing a baseball. She said, yeah, but when was the last time? And I said, probably about 20 some years ago. So the next day, Cheryl shows up with, I had one glove with another glove and a baseball. And so we went out in our front driveway, measured it off, 60 feet, 6 inches. And for 2 weeks, Cheryl caught, I threw the ball. Because I told Cheryl, there's one thing that's going to happen here. I'm going to throw this ball from the pitcher's mound. And so indeed, I did. And Cheryl's a good athlete. She was on the receiving end. And when it came time for the first pitch, I asked Mickey Hatcher, a great Dodger, to be the catcher. And so that was the first ball.
And I do believe, according to the book, that it was a strike. Is that true?
It's my memory, but I've got a selective memory. So I think of it as a strike.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's a really, really good story. And says a lot about Cheryl.
Yes.
Yes. Tell us, maybe my last question, if you could tell, it's a big audience, but everyone has a common interest, either I think having been treated for cancer or perhaps is supporting a family member or loved one who has gone through cancer. What do you think the greatest misconceptions are about cancer today?
You know, that's a great question, because the misconceptions, I don't know, because that is in everyone's mind, but I will say this, that I think that we don't really know, it's not necessarily a misconception, but I don't think we really know how to respond to people dealing with cancer. I, of course, had never personally experienced it. My mother died of cancer, and so I knew in helping her. But UCLA, there was a big story in the LA Times just recently, and you may have seen it, about UCLA and its clinics, because of the pandemic and family members not being able to be there. Cancer patients writing notes left for other cancer patients. Quite a remarkable story. And one of the people involved with UCLA was a nurse in oncology who realized, and who then was hit by cancer, and realized, as much as she thought she knew, she didn't know. But the one thing that really, one of the things that made an impact, and it's on a bookcase back here, when, and I think this is going to be useful for cancer patients. I got a call from one night from a former Dodger photographer and a friend, Richard P. And he said, Fred, he knew I was away from home. He said, when will you be home? And I said, I'll be home in about a half hour. He said, there's a package on your doorstep. I don't want you to open it until Cheryl is there. So I came home and opened the book, and I can still see it. Rich is a great photographer. He may be on this call, I don't know. Rich is a great photographer. This book had no photographs. The title of the book, With Baseball Seams, was shared. And what happened was that Rich went to people, unbeknownst to me, and asked them to write a little something about me. The impact of that book, hearing from people that I hadn't heard from in 10 years. Some may be well known, some are not certainly in any spotlight. And the impact of that was such that I thought a lot about that. And I saw a story one time about a lady whose father was in an assisted living home. And she didn't feel that her father was being well cared for. And so she went home and she compiled a scrapbook of her father, a successful businessman, a wonderful father, a mentor to many, a World War II hero. And she took the book into the people at the assisted living and said, this is who you're dealing with. This is my father. If all of us took the time for people having cancer, going through cancer, to say nothing more than you're in our thoughts, you're in our prayers. I think that's one of the most powerful things that can happen. And as a cancer patient, I realize that fully, the impact of somebody reaching out. And I said to City of Hope that one of the great things that they do when you walk into City of Hope, or when you used to before the pandemic, there are cards. On that card, there's a little notation. They're asking for suggestions. And the notation is, we care. You have to care if you're going to help the cancer patient.
Thank you. Tell me your emotional connection, I'm sure, I would assume, to the current Dodgers. I'd like to know what it felt like for you to watch them in 2020.
It felt great because of the Dodgers. The Dodger person in uniform that I'm closest to is the wonderful manager, Dave Roberts, who's become a friend and who's very supportive and who has a notation on the back of extra innings. And in 2019, Dave was heavily criticized. Dodgers didn't get to the World Series. The media blitzed him. Mm. And I said, Dave, your team set a record for wins. You didn't get to the World Series. Your team set a record for wins. I never once heard you take credit. I only heard you give credit and take responsibility. I said, one of the happiest days that I will have in baseball is to see you holding a World Championship Dodger trophy. So you can imagine, and you can imagine that when I texted him after the celebration, his kind response. So my connection is a Dodger forever. My connection really is to the people who I knew as a Dodger when they were Dodger, and so many great friends and so supportive. We've had 2 charity golf tournaments for City of Hope, and Hershiser and Vinny and all the Dodger greats have been there and have been supportive. So it's just great friends.
That's wonderful. Well, on that note, I'm going to ask you my last question, which is very important to some of our audience, which is, what is your favorite order at Pie and Burger?
Oh, Pie and Burger. Well, Pie and Burger seems to make its way into my resume.
Apparently.
You know, the thing about Pie and Burger, the great diner in Pasadena, what I miss the most is the friendships that existed at Pie and Burger. When to be there with my buddies, friends, or meeting a young student or whoever it was for breakfast, that's what I really miss more than anything. But that being said, as far as a specific order, when we gather again for breakfast at Pasadena, I think I'll have the thin pancakes and maybe a little fruit.
Okay. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It's an honor to meet you. And I just really enjoyed learning all of this. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Sean and Ellen, for moderating that. And thank you, Fred, for answering so authentically. And I think what shows through in your words and in your book is a quote that came directly from it, which is, the support of others is truly a powerful healing tool. And I can see that shine through in your words. You being here tonight shows that you care. And there's so much love in the chat. There's a lot of love for the Dodgers and for you and City of Hope. You're even reaching somebody who is in the infusion room right now.
Rachel, I lost you, you froze there, and I think that was an important point.
I froze, I'm sorry about that. We're all navigating this strange virtual world, but I was just saying that we're receiving a lot of love in the chat and we would like to open it up to Q&A from everybody in attendance now. So I'd like to invite people to unmute themselves or to type questions into the chat.
Well,
I'm not afraid to ask a question. Fred, is going back to Pineburger, is it true that you and Ed Shea actually bought one of the TVs above the cooking area?
It's true that Ed Shea bought one. I didn't. I can't take credit for something I didn't do, but I didn't buy the TV. Actually, the remote went out, so I furnished them with a remote, but that's as much credit as I can take.
Exactly. Fred, oh, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Okay. Hi, Fred. This is Pete Pachorik. I just always feel fortunate anytime I get a chance to interact with you and hear from you. There's always so many great pearls that I take away. And tonight, I really just loved what you talked about with Cheryl, the story about you guys playing catch to warm yourself up and get ready to throw out the first pitch. And I think your message to all of us about, our spouses and really valuing how they're always there with us at our side, through the good times and through the tough times. And I think that's just a great message that really resonated with me. So thank you for sharing that. And thank you to Cheryl too, for always being so wonderful.
You bet, Pete. And I think the last time Pete and I met, not surprising, was at Pie and Burger. And Pete, as we were leaving, you ran into a friend there that you hadn't seen who was instrumental in your life also.
Absolutely. That was Dr. Bryant Alexander, who was the chair of my thesis committee at Cal State LA, and he's now the dean of education at Loyola Marymount now. Wonderful person.
So a question came through in the chat, and I just wanted to reiterate, there's some lovely conversations going on in the chat. Fred, you're even reaching somebody who's in the infusion room at City of Hope. That's just incredible. But a question came in from Kurt, and he is asking, has Major League Baseball taken an interest in your idea of having sunscreen dispensers at all stadiums?
Well, it's a idea that Kurt and I have, that I told Kurt about, because I really want to see Major League Baseball do this. Having, and Major League Baseball now in some ways, actually they made a deal with hand cleanser because of what we're going through with the pandemic. But I will be reaching out to Major League Baseball, and Major League Baseball, if you're listening tonight, I would love to see Major League Baseball connect with a company that produces lip gloss and sunscreen. Would be a great commercial enterprise. I'm not interested in money. I'm interested in people having that at the ballpark. The connection between baseball and City of Hope is so remarkable that it's almost hard to believe. There's a story here in the Pasadena paper recently. City of Hope got a $100 million donation from Dr. Arthur Riggs, who, as you may know, produced the first synthetic human insulin.
Yeah.
That it's in the book. That night that they had the breakthrough, Dr. Riggs couldn't stay for all of the celebration of the breakthrough because he promised his son he would take him to a Dodger game. So that's where Dr. Riggs was. Mm-hmm. So there's the connection between baseball and City of Hope that is so meaningful. And as part of all of that, when we had our City of Hope golf tournaments, we raised that portion to raise $500,000 due to the help of friends. for City Hope through 2 charity golf tournaments. And we gave a trophy, what I wanted to term the Celebration of Life Award. And I wanted the trophy. We gave it the first year to the wonderful Rod Carew, and so happy that we were able to give it in 2018 to my dear friend, the late Tommy Lasorda. More than anything, in wanting a trophy, I wanted words on the trophy. And if you see that trophy, that award, Celebration of Life, there's one quote on there from another person who knows something about Pasadena. Jackie Robinson, raised in Pasadena. Because the quote on that trophy, the City Hope Trophy for our tournament, reads as follows: "A life is not important except on the impact it has on other lives." And if we all keep that one quote in mind, we will advance in what we're trying to do.
That's a lovely quote. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you also for advocating for sunscreen dispensers at Dodger Stadium with the sun. I think, that's just a wonderful way to share information and raise awareness around this. So thank you for that. Other questions from the audience or in the chat?
Fred, this is Patricia. I just want to pick up on what Pete said, because I had a similar question. I am struck by the incredible dedication of Cheryl to you. And there was one part in the book where I think it's when you had your final surgery, the very invasive surgery. And she writes, or Tim wrote, that it was hard for Cheryl to come into that room the first day or two after your surgery. Your face was swollen. And I just wonder, in all of these years, has Cheryl, as a caregiver, gotten any support? Because we need to focus on caregivers as well as patients.
Well, I think that as Tim saw firsthand, and as the book, I think, tells the story, and it's been so rewarding to see the acknowledgement that Tim saw in writing the book and the importance. And so I'm very blessed. And unfortunately, every patient isn't as blessed. And that is why your support center becomes very important, is so very important. Because many times Cheryl and I would walk out the City Hope together, Cheryl having been there with me throughout the day. And we see a cancer patient getting in a car or folding up their walker by themselves. This is what we have to do better. This is what we have to do. Those of us who've been supported have an obligation to give support. But for Cheryl, she knows how I feel, because there was a previous book, Fred Clare, My 30 Years in Dodger Blue, signed simply, not simply, but meaningfully, "You are the wind beneath my wings." I don't mean to get emotional, but I do when I talk about Cheryl. She's also a very good golfer and was a great tennis player. So we're always, we go through City of Hope. We go after the scan tomorrow. God willing, we're headed to Oakmont to hit a few golf balls.
Thank you for sharing that, Fred. And, in our rooms at CSC, we see laughter, we see tears, because the cancer experience encompasses it all. And, I think caregivers are often the unsung heroes, and I can sense that in your story with Cheryl. So thank you for sharing that. Couple of lighthearted questions in the chat. it's kind of a two-parter. What is your favorite baseball movie in general? And what do you think of the movie Moneyball and the book?
Moneyball, I knew Billy Beane when he was a young guy with Oakland, a scout. And there were parts of it that I wasn't thrilled with. I mean, those of us in the game knew the analytical parts that were kind of focused with Billy. But a dear friend of mine was the manager of that Oakland team, Art Howe. And I think many of the scouts and baseball people didn't get the deserved credit. It was kind of a, just that Moneyball was popular, done well, but there's more to baseball than that. Pete Pachoric on this call, when he asked me to get involved with the organization or what he wanted to do, a nonprofit, characterless company. You can take all of the analytics that you want. There is nothing more important than the character of the person. And you know what? It's not a close race. It's not a close race. So I've often said the most underrated part of the scouting report is character. That's what I wanted. That's what I wanted on my team. And one of my favorite books is Jim Collins' Good to Great. And when you read Jim Collins' book about the most successful companies, it all has to do with leadership, getting the right people on the bus, which is what City Hope and other great organizations do. And two major concepts, the flywheel concept, day after day after day. You don't cure cancer in a day. You don't have a breakthrough in a day. It's a process. And the other term that I like is the hedgehog process. You guys just keep after it. You just got to keep after it. And those are important lessons for all of us.
Yes, and I can see all the parallels between your career and your cancer experience and building slowly and intentionally day by day. So, I mean, there's so many gems in this talk, so thank you. Another question came through in the chat. This is from Sandy. She said, thank you for your inspiring words. As you mentioned, you were shocked when you received your diagnosis. What advice would you give to someone who has recently received a cancer diagnosis?
You have to, you know, you can't give someone as much as you would like to or think that it would be helpful. You can't give someone a mindset. But I think that when you think in terms of whatever it is, that I can beat this. I can beat this. And the value of life, the gift of life, is so precious that you have to have a determination that you're going to fight. And those are the people who inspire me. There are so many wonderful success stories. But I think that's the greatest thing that I would hope that anyone who has that diagnosis, you know, in the book, the great part of the book, it's not the Fred story. That book was written several years ago, a number of years ago. It's about other people. It's about the general manager of the Padres, Kevin Towers, who lost his battle to anaplastic thyroid cancer. He dealt with a cancer that was literally unbeaten. Usually you have weeks. Kevin lasted and fought for a year. It's the story of a young high school pitcher by the name of Jalen Fawn at City of Hope, who had leukemia, bright young pitcher. And the leukemia came back, and his parents were devastated. And Tim Madigan, the author, tells the story. They go to City of Hope to meet with Jalen again to tell him what he's going to have to go through for a second time. So Jalen finally looks at his watch and he says, what time is this going to end? Because I've got baseball practice in an hour. Do everything you can not to let cancer interfere with your life. My fibula bone is in my mouth. I don't eat a hamburger the same way I used to. I can barely eat one, of course. You have to take what you have and do the most with what you have. Mm-hmm. And that probably a little bit of that comes from my background, because I was never a great athlete. But at the basketball gym, I was the first one there and the last one to leave. So I knew they weren't going to spend more time than I did. And you can't give someone to that attitude, but you can learn that, I think, from others who truly, and there's so many people at City of Hope that are great inspirations.
Rachel, I'd like to, or for Fred, I'd like to make one observation and then I have a question. Pete Paciorek was a Titan like I was. We both played for the same baseball coach, only we were about 30 years apart, I think, Mickey McNamee. And he used to have an expression that character is what you do when no one else is looking, which is a great one, which is your core. But the question really that I have is, when we come back after COVID, and I know that Patricia and Rachel and Julie are going to be all over you, but when the world opens up, will you please come to our next Legacy of Hope reception in our facility and just chat with us for 15 or 20 minutes? But I don't know if that's going to be 2022 or 2023, but will you come?
I will, for sure. No question. I never turned down anything or anyone. And Ross Porter knew I was going through cancer treatment. And so he reached out to Tom Brokaw. And Tom called me one night. Now, I didn't know Tom well. He was in Los Angeles. He knew me through the Dodgers, but we were not close. But he called me to give support. And he said something very important too, and I think this is in the book. He said, Fred, you know, I've been on the board of the Mayo Clinic. I've been very blessed in my life. And Tom has battled cancer now for a number of years. But he said, I don't know about City of Hope, but I want to tell you one thing. And the words stuck with me and I've passed them on. Never be afraid to ask for a second opinion. So when you're in your battle and someone tells you there's no chance, I wouldn't accept that. You're not going to tell me that. It's like telling me I'm not going to be a big league player. You can't tell me that. So you seek help as much as you can. And I have seen that and have been blessed to see that full force through the City of Hope, where people that I've recommended or been able, fortunately, to set up a second opinion at City of Hope, it's all the fight. It's all in the fight. It's all in the battle. You know, it's fascinating. In fact, it's sad. But when we pick up the obituary tomorrow, we will read, and time and again, is someone lost the battle to cancer. Well, it is the battle, and we recognize that. But we need to, you don't really lose it when you fight with all of your heart. But I will be there wherever you need me, and I look forward to it. Cheryl and I live in Pasadena, so that, and I think it's tremendous. I think, and I know Dr. Rosen did a video talking about the thought of a support center, not in the hospital, but where patients can get together, because the importance of patients talking to one another gaining from one another, being inspired by one another. I applaud your efforts, and that's why I'm happy to be here today. We'll be here whenever you need me.
That's so thoughtful, Fred, and so appreciate what you're saying, that, you know, our identity is so much more than one thing, right? Not just a cancer patient, but also a baseball player, as was the case with Jalen. So I love those words. I can see we're winding down. I'm wondering if there's any other questions from the audience.
We have one more question in chat.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I missed that. This comes from Robin. And she said, I came here because of my love of baseball, but your spirit is amazing and inspirational. Thank you.
You bet, Robin.
I'm glad you're better. I wanted to ask, since you're a free agent now, who's your all-time favorite baseball player? And who is the Dodger you're most proud of signing?
Those are tough questions because I never like to be that selective, but I'll tell you a story that has great meaning for me, which is maybe a reflection of what the game is all about. My first major trade, we needed a center fielder badly in 1987. A young man had come up from AA, and I can remember, Pete will relate to this, there was a ball in center field that he misplayed. And went for it, was judged an error, as it should have been. The writers went to him after the game and said, how did you feel about that ball where you were given an error? And this young, inexperienced man said, you expect me to catch everything? And when I read that quote, I knew we needed to change. Yeah, I expect you to catch everything that's catchable. I do. That's what we're going to do, and I expect you to take responsibility when you don't catch it.
Yeah.
So we need a center fielder. So there's a player that the Baltimore Orioles had sent to the minor leagues. His name is John Shelby, somewhat well known now, and he was sent to Rochester, New York. It's early in the season. It's colder than heck in Rochester. And so through some reports, I identified Shelby. And I knew about him because one spring training, Lou Johnson, a former player, sat with me in spring training before I was the general manager. He said, Fred, I really like this guy, Shelby. Shelby goes to the minor leagues. I sent the wonderful scout and friend Mel Didier down to scout Shelby. And so Mel says, Fred, it's colder than heck here. This guy's the first guy on the field. His character. And so I made a trade. And so I called John. We're staying at the Grand Hyatt in New York, 1987. And I called John and I said, John, this is Fred Clare of the Dodgers. We've just made a trade and I want you to report tonight. Oh, he said, Mr. Clare, he said, it'll take me 3 days to get to Albuquerque, thinking he was going to our AAA team. I said, John, you're not going to Albuquerque. I want you to come to Shea Stadium tonight. You are the starting center fielder of the Los Angeles Dodgers. I thought the phone was misconnected. It must have been a minute or more. And he said, Mr. Clare, he said, I've waited all my life to hear those words. John Shelby became one of the top center fielders in the National League that year and helped lead us to the World Series. Now, the reason he was worried about coming to taking 3 days is he's told me they had 2 young children and his wife was expecting. Well, and they were taking those days to get to Albuquerque. Well, if you come to Shea. One of those young children is now 30 years old, 30-some years old, by the name of Jeremy Shelby, who was a wonderful young man, came to Pasadena before the pandemic and visited in my office. He played some minor league baseball. And so here is Jeremy and the Shelby family, 30 some years later. So just this past week, I was on a call. I'm part of Jeremy's team because he's been nominated for Man of the Year in Florida in a fight against leukemia, because Jeremy Shelby has overcome cancer twice. So baseball, if you put your heart and soul into it, far more than a game. It's the personal connections.
That's incredible. And also to hear the legacy of your work in this next generation supporting Jeremy. I know we're at time, but if you can indulge one final question, I think this is a good
and as many as you have.
So this
my wife, Cheryl, went out for Panda Inn, so she's not back, and she asked me if it was all right to have a Mai Tai. So of course I'm going to have a Mai Tai. Maybe have two tonight.
So this is a great note to end on. What makes the Dodgers one of the greatest organizations in all sports?
Well, I think that in my years, look, it's all about, like any organization, leadership. And in my view, what made the Dodgers of Los Angeles great, and I give all the respect to the current ownership, there's one family, one ownership that established the foundation, and that was the O'Malley family, Walter and Peter O'Malley. And there are so many similarities between that leadership and City of Hope. And City of Hope, it's all about a philosophy, caring about people. And I'll go back to my dear friend Majabine, that's symbolic of the story. So after occupational therapy with Majabine one day, we walk out of her office and here comes Dr. Foreman. So I say to Dr. Foreman, Majabine is the greatest occupational therapist you have at City. Well, she's the only one I knew. So she is the greatest occupational therapist you have at City Hope. And the wonderful Dr. Foreman said, no, Fred. She's one of the occupational therapists we have at City of Hope. We are a team. And Robert Stone, as the leader, knows it. When you have great people, and there are many, when you have great people like Dr. Foreman and Dr. Rosen at the top, and many others who I know and should name them all. And in my own experience, when you have Dr. Vernon and Dr. Mazzarelli and Dr. Dadwal and Dr. Modi, and when you have Majabine, and when you have all the other people, and one of the people that sent me an email and said, I can't be with you tonight, is one of the true heroes of the City of Hope, because she is a nurse, Candy Young. She said, the reason that I can't be with you at 6 o'clock tonight at City of Hope are 2 more board meets with the head and neck people to discuss our patients. 6 o'clock tonight. People coming together at City of Hope to try to find a solution to cure a patient. That's what makes City of Hope great. Team. Sorry.
No, we appreciate your authenticity and your heart, and you're somebody who doesn't only talk the talk, but you walk the walk. That is so clear. And you've built so many attuned and successful and compassionate teams in your life, Fred. And we are just so privileged to have witnessed you sharing tonight. And on behalf of everybody here, I just want to thank you for your candor and your willingness and your openness and your generosity. And I think we are all walking away with a few quotes and a few gems that we can apply to our lives. So I want to thank you, Fred.
If anyone on the call wants to reach out to me by email, you can provide the email. I'd be happy to answer any question or to be of any help that that I might be. And if you haven't read Extra Innings, as you're well aware, read Extra Innings. Most importantly, all of the funds go to
here.
City Hall.
Fantastic.
Thank you, Fred.
And thanks all for joining us tonight.
You bet.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you, Fred. Thank you, everybody.